Volume is the modern currency. Everyone competing for airspace. Everybody's dumb, shouting muddled words as though they're deaf.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball, the same on Instagram and on Facebook at facebook.com/redrockbasketball. Well, we're here, we're back, we're ready to tackle the second half of the NBA season, and by that, of course, I mean...
Playoffs?
Yes, playoffs. We are going to be talking playoffs. We're going to be looking at, and we're going to do this for the playoffs while all these DFS contests are going on, talking about all the matchups, breaking them down, and trying to find some value, and discussing just what's actually happening in the playoffs as well. So part DFS, part just general NBA discussion through these next month, couple of months, 2 months, however long it goes until the DFS contests end, and then we switch into season review podcast mode until we head into the NBA draft. So it's always full steam ahead for this podcast for this time of the year. Obviously, the shows are going to be shorter because we're only going to be talking about 4 games at most each day. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So
Let's get to it.
also, because this is like a transition portion of the show, we've gone from regular season into postseason. I just changed up the start of the show. So I'm not going to be doing... last season, I used to announce birthdays at the start of the show. This time I did NBA player quotes. Now what I feel like doing, and I might change this at some point, but what I'm doing at the start is I'm just putting up song lyrics that I'm listening to for that day and things that I find interesting. So that's it. That's all the quote is at the start of the show. Each song that I put up at the start, or that I read the lyrics out for the start of the show, I'll put a link to that in the post as well if you do want to go listen to the actual song. But today's song was called Lullaby, and that's what I'm going to be doing. That's just how it goes. All right, let's get stuck into this as Michael Bolton suggested that we do. There are 4 games on Saturday. The playoffs, it feels like it's here really quickly. Only a 2-day break. I was expecting to have that a 3-day break. I don't know why, but yes, I guess starting on the Saturday does make sense. So here we are. There's 4 games on Saturday, 4 games on Sunday. The first game, it's an early game, and remember the playoffs, especially on the on the weekends, the playoffs, we get a big spread of start time. So we've got a 7.5-hour differential between the start of the first game and the start of the last game. Thankfully, there's not many injury situations we need to pay attention to. There's not going to be any sneaky rests sprung upon us. There's only over the course of the whole day, there's only 3 injuries that really we need to pay attention to. And to be honest, only one of them is going to make too much of a difference in terms of lineups. And that's with MEMPHIS and James Ennis, who's missed the last couple of games with some knee bursitis, and with Tony Allen out, Ennis could have a significant role. The other guys who we don't know the status of is Al Jefferson in Indiana. That's not impacting anybody. And Kay Felder in Cleveland, also not impacting anybody. The big question we're going to have through all this time is, what rotations are the coaches going to run? We don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to go from 10-man rotations to 8-man rotations? To 9-man rotations? Who misses out? They're going to be players that played significant roles in the regular season that don't play at all. You got guys like perhaps Myers Leonard in Portland with Yusuf Nurkic potentially being ready to go. You might not see Myers Leonard at all. You might not see Boris Diaw in Utah. You might not see Aaron Brooks in Indiana. There are numerous players who played roles who you might not see. Richard Jefferson in Cleveland. You might not see Channing Frye in Cleveland. We just don't know how these rotations are going to play out. Minutes are going to be bumped up. So you're going to see numerous starters playing 40 minutes a night. And that's going to give a lot of value to these higher price sort of players. And it's trying to work out where those minutes go. And if the game stays close, because if the game becomes a blowout, then these guys won't play 42 minutes. But if it stays marginally close, you're going to have guys like DeMar DeRozan, Paul George, LeBron James, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, DeAndre Jordan, Gordo Hayward. They're going to be playing 40 minutes a night, and they can do that in the playoffs. And that's why the playoffs are fun in terms of watching them, because the level of play increases because we're getting the better players playing more minutes. There's no back-to-backs. There's sometimes 2-day rests, 3-day rests happening. So there is there is a lot of excitement at this time of the year, but the rotations do get cut short up. The other thing that happens throughout the DFS world is that the minimum salaries get dropped. So DraftKings had a minimum salary of $3,000. You'll see on today's slate or Saturday's slate that you've got guys that are under $3,000, a couple of 2,700 guys, a 2,500 guy, I believe. I don't think FanDuel's done that just yet, dropped under their minimum of 3,500, but they will do that at some point as well as the rotations become thinner and the games played become fewer. You'll see that minimum salary drop as well. So you'll get cheaper, $3,000 guys on FanDuel even. Let's talk about this first game of the first series, and that is the 2-7 Indiana Pacers versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs are favored by 8.5, the second highest spread on the day. The total is 209.5, which is the highest total of the day. As I said earlier, we don't know if Kay Felder will play, but even if he's healthy, he's not playing anyway, so it doesn't matter. And Al Jefferson is doubtful. I don't even know if Jefferson was healthy, whether he would play. We saw him in and out of the rotation even when he was healthy during the season. Kevin Seraphin has been a better player than him for the majority of this year anyway, and he's bothered with this ankle problem. So I don't even think that even if he is declared active, we're going to see Jefferson necessarily take the court, because there's Lavoy Allen, there is Kevin Seraphin, there's Raheem Christmas, who honestly, all of them have outplayed Jefferson at times during this season. So I don't think Big Al is going to have really too much of an impact, especially against a three-point shooting team like the Cleveland Cavaliers. Imagine they put Shane Fry at center, or they've got Kevin Love at center and Al Jefferson's trying to guard him. Forget it. It's over. So that's a real bother for Jefferson in that sort of a situation. But he's not going to play anyway in this game, so let's just talk about what is going to happen, or what we think is going to happen. And let's talk about the point guards first. We've got Jeff Teague matching up against Kyrie Irving.
My name is Jeff.
It sure is. I like Jeff Teague here. He is a $7,000 player over on FanDuel. He is a 7,300 on DraftKings, so that's obviously not quite where we want it to be. But it's 7,000 on DraftKings. I like it. The last 3 times he's played the Cavs, he averages 40 points anyway, and he's going to see a lot of minutes, because I don't know if Aaron Brooks is going to play in this series, and the reason for that is twofold. He's not good. And during the season, he actually was out of the rotation when healthy. The Pacers, I think, will run at backup point guard Monte Ellis. And if they need to, they'll run Lance Stevenson there. So I think that's the way that they'll run. They'll run a 4-guard rotation with CJ Miles. They'll run Jeff Teague. They'll run Monte Ellis, and they'll run Lance Stevenson. And maybe Brooks is on the outside looking in, or he just gets a real handful of minutes. There's a real chance that he doesn't see the court at all during this season, or during this postseason. As for Teague, at 7,000 on FanDuel, I do really like that. You know, the Kyrie Irving defense is not something to be really feared. Now, as for Kyrie, he is at $9,000 on FanDuel. I'm not interested. At 78 on DraftKings, he becomes a better option than Jeff Teague over on DraftKings at 7,800. He has a 43-point average the last 3 times against the Pacers, but I can see him getting way more than that, playing those extra minutes. Now, this is the second highest spread of the day. I don't necessarily think it's going to be that much of a blowout. Paul George can keep things close. The Cavs haven't necessarily been firing on all cylinders. They do tend to sleepwalk their way through some of these early games in series. LeBron's got a notorious history of losing the first game in series as well. So I'm not sure it's going to be that big of a difference in this one. And that could enable guys like Kyrie having to play 41, 42 minutes and really putting up significant numbers. So I think both of these guys, Teague on FanDuel and Irving on DraftKings, become very, very interesting options. J.R. Smith's been brutally bad. He is at 3,700, but you get the feeling that he's going to play big minutes. But if he struggles, they do have the option of running Iman Shumpert there, who's terrible, or Kyle Korver, who is another guy that can hit those threes. But Smith at 3,700 is not someone I feel strongly about for cash. He didn't come in. He had that nice little run about 2 weeks ago, but then dropped back off at the end of the season. So I'm not fully thinking that he is going to be some sort of awesome cash option or anything like that. But he is a very nice GPP play. He's at 39 on DraftKings. So there is some value there for JR, but he is more of that tournament sort of a player. For the Pacers, we've got Lance. You've got Monte Ellis at shooting guard. The other 2 shooting guards, Kyle Korver and Shumpert. I wouldn't touch Shumpert at all. Korver is a guy that maybe he gets hot and hits some threes, but I wouldn't be counting on it as a huge upside play. But the Indiana guys, Ellis and Stevenson it's an interesting thing. Now, Stevenson's coming off the last game of the season where he scored 26 points in 23 minutes. And at $4,000 or less than 4,000, 3,800, that's something that you should pay some attention to. I don't feel overly confident about Stevenson being able to put up numbers like that, nor do I feel confident about Alice being able to put up big numbers. I think they play like mid-20 minutes between them, and that's not really giving any of them a huge leg up in terms of value. If I'm picking one of them, I do probably pick Lance just because he is cheaper. He's $500 cheaper on DraftKings. He's $200 cheaper over on FanDuel, but unless we hear something new from Nate McMillan that he's going to play a lot more Monte, which is possible. He might play 29 minutes of Monte and only 18 of Lance. That's something that could happen. But with the way that it ran through the end of the season, with Stevenson playing more minutes than Alice, and Alice going from 30 minutes down to 24 when Stevenson arrived, I would have to think that they do value what Stevenson can do, which is such a weird sentence to say at this point in the season, and that will limit what Monte can do there. At small forward, of course, we've got the two big guns here, LeBron James and Paul George. LeBron is at $11,000. He was coming out off some huge performances, and there is absolutely no reason that you should be worried about LeBron. He's averaged 56 the last 3 times that he has taken on Paul George and the Pacers, and on DraftKings scoring, that's 61 points, and he is at 10,800. So LeBron is an absolutely superb option to use at small forward. There's 3 awesome small forwards that are running on this slate. We've got LeBron, you've got George, and you've got Kawhi. LeBron and Kawhi to me are the better two there, but George definitely has his value, especially on DraftKings where you can use him as a power forward as well. He's at 9,800, Paulie George, and he's averaging 52 points across his last 3 games, and he has done very well against Cleveland in the past as well. So I think that both of those guys are worth looking at. I would take LeBron over George, especially on FanDuel, but I would do it on DraftKings as well. But George does have that extra value on DraftKings because he comes in as a power forward option. CJ Miles is a minimum salary player on FanDuel, $3,500. I think that is a nice GPP option. And in fact, as a GPP, I would actually prefer using Miles over someone like Monte Ellis or Lance Stevenson, because I think that he's got the ability to just get hot. And if they decide that the Cavs are going smaller and playing LeBron at the 4 with Fry at the 5 or Love at the 5, or if they're going to go that way, that's going to enable more Paul George, CJ Miles combination lineups. And running Lance and Teague as the backcourt and minimizing Thad Young to a degree. Not that they'll limit him too much, but I think that you could see them doing that rather than playing big minutes of Lavoy Allen or Seraphin or guys along that line. So that's another way that I think that Miles could get an extra run. So he becomes a nice minimum salary guy who's got that ability to pop off for 30 points at 3,500. That does bring him into consideration. At power forward, Thaddeus Young, 5,200. Yeah, I liked when Thad was coming in at 4,800, and he had looked a lot better, and the wrist looked like it's fine. I just don't find anything sexy here about Thad. I think the upside there is really limited. At 56 on DraftKings, I don't even want to touch it for cash. On FanDuel at 52 for cash, I think it's all right, and I think you should feel pretty good about him getting 27 or 28. I think that's a pretty nice cash play, but the upside is very limited for Thad. I don't think that he's really got 40-point upside. I don't even think that he's got really 35-point upside, but you should feel pretty good about him getting at least 25 and probably 27 to 28 most of these games, and that's good in itself. Kevin Love has seen a big bump in his salary. He's an $8,300 player. I think that's too much for Love. We have seen Ty Lue not necessarily run Love big minutes in the playoffs. We've seen him play him 31, 32 minutes. He's not that guy that gets 40 like LeBron or 40 like Tristan Thompson even or Kyrie. Yeah, they will limit Love at times if he is struggling. So 8,300 for Kevin is not a superb situation. He's at 79 on DraftKings, and that does give me a little bit more confidence. He's coming in strong, averaging 43 over his last 5 games, and at 7,900, I can be pretty interested in using Love on DraftKings at that sort of a price tag, but I just don't really like it that much on FanDuel. But this matchup's not a horrendous one for Kevin. Defensively, I don't think there's too much of an issue unless they go with a lot of Paul George at the 4, which might bother him there. But otherwise, I think that Love is a pretty decent play. Tristan Thompson returned in that last game of the regular season from his thumb issue. He's at 4,700. I like him here. I don't think that we're going to see monster scores, but at 4,700, I feel pretty good about him at least pushing 25 points and getting you 25 and going. Here's a nice cash play for Tristan Thompson at 4,700. He's at 45 on DraftKings, the same as well. His recent form hasn't looked good, but I think that he can play well against Miles Turner, who's not a good rebounder, and that's one of Tristan Thompson's strengths. Especially offensive rebounding, and I think that that can really start to boost his numbers up. And he's going to play a lot of minutes. I'm fairly confident at that. We're going to see quite a bit of Tristan Thompson throughout this series. Now, as for Miles Turner, he's at 6,900. He finished the end of the season really strongly after that little lull. A couple of nice games, but I don't like this matchup. He has struggled against Cleveland immensely, averaging just 23 points the last 3 times that these teams have met. He's at 65 on DraftKings. I'm not totally into it. Now, I think he's going to play a decent chunk of minutes, and he could pop off, but he's really just a tournament guy and not really a cash option in my opinion. Luke Smith says, I'd be pretty turgid if I was walking in Australia and saw a guy in a jersey from the movie Hoosiers. Just saying. Luke, obviously, if you're not watching this on video, you can, behind me, I've got a Paul George Hickory High jersey. Luke, I can 100% guarantee you that I would never be walking down the street wearing any of these jerseys that I've got. It's just not a good look for an old flabby white man to be walking the street in basketball jerseys here. Not only just in Australia. I don't wear them. They're here just for my own personal set decoration and enjoyment. But if I don't think the only time I'd ever maybe wear them is if I was just going down to play. And that's about it. But yeah, I'm not just going to be casually strolling the street in my Hickory High jersey. But thank you for the turgid reference. Anyone else we need to talk about from this series? I reckon that's pretty much everybody. I don't think there's much point in looking too closely at guys like Seraphin or Channing Frye. Let's move on to the next one now, and that is another Eastern Conference battle, and that is one that's pretty intriguing to me, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are favored by 7.5 points. The total is 199.5. A lowish total. This is a game that starts at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 7:30 a.m. here in Australia on Sunday morning for us. So the other one starts at 5. I'm not sure I'm going to get up at 5 for Pacers Cavs, but 7:30 I'll definitely be there watching that Milwaukee one and have to watch the Pacers Cavs one a little bit later on delay. This is a really, really intriguing series, this Milwaukee Toronto one. We spoke about it yesterday on our podcast. I believe if I remember correctly, I picked the Bucks in 7. Yes, I did. So let's see. And that's nothing against Toronto. I just think it's going to be a really, really interesting series. Let's talk point guards, because there's one guy we really do need to talk about, and that is Kyle Lowry, who is at $8,600. I think we're going to see a lot of Lowry. We started to see quite a bit of him down the stretch coming back from this wrist injury. I reckon we're going to be seeing close to 40 for him, if not more than 40 minutes, assuming the Bucks can keep it close. At 8,600, it's a decent chunk, but I don't think it's an extraordinarily high amount for Kyle, so I'd be okay with using him and thinking I'm getting 40 points out of Kyle Lowry here. We know that Dwayne Casey's go-to playoff move is, Kyle and DeMar, can you just do everything? And it almost didn't work against the Pacers last year. It worked at times against the Cavs and against the Heat, but it did struggle against the Pacers. But this is his go-to thing, and this is why I don't think that Casey is a good coach, because he's just very unimaginative on offense. And let's see if that does come unstuck here. Now, we know that the Bucks have been quite good at defending point guards this season. Dellavedova, Brogdon, Yanni, Middleton. They've got very good perimeter defenders who can disrupt things for point guards. But I think Lowry, just the bulk minutes that he's likely to see here, is going to give him value at that $8,600 price tag. At 82 on DraftKings, it's still really good, but I think there are some other point guards in that higher price range that might come in a little bit better than him, but he is still a pretty nice option. The other guy that you can't 100% discount is Corey Joseph. He's at 3,900, but we saw towards the end of the season him playing a lot of backup too. You're playing heaps of minutes. You're taking Norm Powell out of the rotation completely, taking Delon Wright out of the rotation completely, and us seeing a lot of Lowry, Joseph, and DeRozan together, or Lowry, Joseph together, running on the court at the same time. and him getting 27, 28 minutes and actually thriving in that role. So I can see Corey Joseph at 3,900 being a sneaky GPP guy, and on DraftKings it's even better because he comes in at $3,500 over there. So I think there is something to see there. Now, as for the Bucks point guards, Daly, no way. Broggo, 5,600 for Malcolm Brogdon. I like what Brogdon can do. I don't think there's really much upside at 5,600 on FanDuel. At 5,000 on DraftKings, I think that he's almost a lock to break that value and get you 26 points. And he does have the ability to go for 30. But at 5,600, I'm not totally convinced that he can do that on FanDuel. The matchup's tough as well. Kyle Lowry is a very, very good defender. Brogdon's a rookie. Although that hasn't really shook him at all during the season. But Lowry is a very good defender. The slower pace of this game as well doesn't get me all that intrigued for a guy like Brogdon. At shooting guard, DeRozan, 8,300. We know he is going to take as many shots as not even as necessary, as many shots as he wants. And there are no other good high-priced shooting guards on this slate. So it's going to be DeRozan. He's at 83 on FanDuel. He's at 8,000 on DraftKings. But he's not the best high-priced guy. You'd give that honor to LeBron and Kawhi, those sort of players on this slate. Chrissy Paul's another one, Lowry. But DeRozan still is a solid guy, and I'd feel pretty good about him at least approaching 40 points on this slate. Now, Yanni is a shooting guard on FanDuel as well. He comes in at 10,400. That's probably just a little bit high to me. The lower speed of this game, the slowed pace, the low total. Yanni's been fantastic, but at 10.4, you need him to be crushing 50. And I'm just not sure he's going to do that, especially for cash. For a tournament, Yanni's got 70-point upside, so that becomes a brilliant option at 10.4 if you're looking for that guy to not be LeBron, to not be Kawhi, for a guy to go off and maybe be a lesser owned player in a tournament. I like Yanni there, but for cash, I'm not really into him. He's at 10.2 on DraftKings as well. Small forwards, this is where I think there's a bit of value floating around. PJ Tucker's at 3,800. I reckon Tucker's going to get in excess of 30 minutes in these playoff games. You're going to see Damari Carroll be terrible, as per usual, and you're going to see a bit of Tucker and Ibaka as the 4-5 combination. I think we're going to see Casey go back to that a little bit in these playoffs. Now, the Valanciunas situation, it's not like the Bucks have got all these big perimeter pick and roll, pick and pop threats like Monroe, Henson, McCurr. These guys aren't players who are going to be able to pop off like that. But if they start playing Yanni at center, then Valanciunas is in a lot of trouble because everybody would be in a lot of trouble against Yanni at center. And they do run Yanni center lineups. They run that. And that puts them in trouble. And I think you'll see Tucker Ibaka lineups in that sort of a situation. And that's going to see PJ play 30. He has got a very good record against Milwaukee. He averages 32 points the last 3 times he's played them. And at 3,800, that's really hard to go past, especially when we consider, or when I consider, you might disagree, but when I consider that he's going to play 30 minutes. He will play more than Damari Carroll. He will play more than Corey Joseph. He will play more than Jonas Valanciunas. He will play more than Delon Wright, who won't play at all. He's going to see a lot of minutes now. He's a good rebounder. He gets steals, and if they start using him to hit threes, then there's real chance. Like, he only needs to get to 20 points, and then you're already in front. And I don't think that's too much of a stretch here for PJ. He's at 34 on DraftKings, which comes in as extraordinarily sexy as well. Relying upon him to pop off and get 30 is probably not great strategy. But the chances of him doing it are way higher than so many of these other guys who are priced low. So I do like PJ here. Chris Middleton at 5,900 hasn't been at his best. That's fair. He's averaging 23 over the last 5 games, but he's a stud. He's going to see his minutes ramp up here, and I think we could be seeing a nice Chris Middleton game. I reckon at that sort of price tag, he is totally fine to get out there. He's at 61 on DraftKings, so I'm probably a little bit less interested in him over there just because the extra price and lower salary cap, of course, but it's not a terrible situation. The other guy to look at in these cheap players is Tone Snell. Tone's been getting 33 minutes a night basically all season. He's going to continue to do that here. He will play at the 2, he'll play at the 3. At 3,600, we have seen multiple times this season that Snell has these weird games that come out of nowhere, and he drops 6 threes and 25 points on 7 shots. Just weird shit like that goes down for Snell. He is far from a let's lock him in, because remember, the only man this year to have a 28 trillion is Tony Snell. So that can completely go bust. And he has shit games and goes missing all the time. But at 3,900, there is a lot of upside there, and he's at 3,000 on DraftKings. So at 3,000, knowing this, look, he had 24 in that last game that he played, which was, and that's not crazy for him, and that's 8x value. He has got massive upside, especially at that $3,000 price tag. A couple other small forwards, Damari Carroll and Mirza Teletovic. Yeah, not really. I don't really see it for either of those guys. I can understand maybe Teletovic if you think he's going to get hot, but I think his minutes are going to be severely restricted in this sort of a matchup, and in the playoff with the playoff rotation. As for Carroll, he's bad. PJ Tucker's better. I don't think we see much out of. I don't think we see a huge amount out of Damari. Serge Ibaka at 5,300 is interesting. He has been putrid. He's averaging, what's he averaging? 19 points in his last 3 games, in 30 minutes a game. So it's not like he's playing 20 minutes. In 30 minutes. Over the last 5, he's averaging under 24. But the price at 5,300 for him is, it's intriguing, definitely. Against the Bucks, whose front court has not been awesome this year, especially if he goes to play center. There's a real chance here for Ibaka to have a huge one. Now, I'm not falling over myself to use him, but there is clear upside at that sort of a price tag. I'm not sure it's the greatest play that's on the board, though. Johnny Henson should be in the rotation for the Bucks, but I don't see that as being anything interesting. Same with Pat Patterson. At center, this is where things get a little bit interesting to me. Greggy Munro at 5,700. Will Milwaukee do the right thing and play him 32 minutes? It's Jason Kidd, so probably not. Now they've got McCurr. Will they continue to start McCurr? I don't know. I think that Thon will continue to start. Now, will they run McCurr, Munro, and Henson? That's the big question. If they eliminate one of these centers, then you're going to get 30 plus out of Greg. And at 5,700, if he plays 30 minutes and at 5,700, he's a lock to beat that. And he becomes a no-brainer play to me if that's what happens. But we don't know what Kidd will do with those 3 centers that he's been just continually persisting with. Does he just take McCurr completely out of the lineup? Now, he's been starting him for the last 2 months and playing him 15 minutes a game. Will he do that? Will he put Henson back in and start him 18 and give Munro 30? Will they run a lot of Yanni at center? I don't know how they're going to do that. So that's the risk with Munro. I'd like to know what happens when we hear a starting lineup. And if McCurr is out of that starting lineup, then Munro, it's all. If McCurr gets out of that starting lineup, he's not playing at all. So that really boosts up what Munro can do, and he becomes a super play at that sort of salary. But as things stand, I'm assuming that we're going to see 3 centers run out. Now, Munro at 4,800 on DraftKings, even if they run the 3 centers and he only plays 27 minutes, I think it's a good play at 4,800 for Munro against this Raptors team that has been decent against centers, but Munro's shown a proclivity this season to put up pretty good numbers most of the time when he gets that playing time. And at 4,800, that salary is extremely appealing. The other centers we need to look at here is McCurr. I don't think there's much to see there with Thon. And Jonas Valanciunas at 5,500. If I had the option between Valanciunas at 55 or Munro at 57, I'd feel a little bit more confident in Munro, to be honest. And especially on DraftKings where it's 48 Munro, 55 Valanciunas. If Valanciunas plays 30 minutes, then he is smashing that. But the likelihood of him playing 30 minutes seems to me to be way less than the likelihood of Munro playing 30 minutes, because I just do think that we're going to see more Tucker Ibaka. Even though Valanciunas pushed his way back to that 27, 28-minute role, played fantastically well, and was fantastic in the playoffs last year, but I don't trust Casey with Valanciunas at this point. At 5,500, he is okay, but he's not great. Like, it's just because of that artificial limitation that's placed on his playing time by the way that Dwayne Casey runs those rotations. All right, let's move on to the next game, which is just going to be disgustingly ugly. This is not one that I'm really interested in watching. I'm sure Spurs fans and Grizzlies fans would disagree with me, but it is, of course, the Spurs and the Grizzlies. The Spurs are favored by 9, and the total is a disgustingly low 190.5. The Grizzlies are without Tone Allen. So that opens up a whole bunch of question marks. Who plays that role? I'll tell you who's been playing that role, or playing big minutes at shooting guard at the end of the season. Wayne Selden. I cannot wrap my head around the fact that Wayne Selden will play playoff minutes. Surely, if Jim Ennis is fine with his knee, then it's him. And we saw a couple of games earlier on when Tone Allen was out that Ennis was playing 30-plus minutes. But with already Chandler Parsons out, you've got Vince Carter at the 3. Who plays at the 2? Is it Selden? Do they put Andy Harrison in there? Is it Jim Ennis? It is a disgusting, disgusting bunch of guys in terms of working out what's going to happen. At this point, I'm assuming it's going to be Jim, but I don't know. It could be Selden. It could be Harrison. I'm not sure at this point, but I would put my money on it at this point as being Jim Ennis. Let's talk point guards in this one. Of course, it's Mike Conley. He's at 7,200. He is going to see a lot of action. There's no doubt about that. He is going to see a lot of minutes. $7,200 on FanDuel is not a high price for Conley. But just in this sort of a matchup, in this low-paced, low-total game, I don't really love it for Mick. He's at 72 on DraftKings as well, and there is value in it, but not compared to a lot of the other point guards that are around. So I'm not really feeling great about Conley. Now, it could just be him and Gasol, especially if they can keep it close. They're just going to have to carry everything, and that is going to bump up what he can do. But I would look to that more in, say, Game 3 or Game 4 at home, when they get the home crowd boost, they keep the game close, and then Conley and Gasol have monsters. In San Antonio, this could be a double-digit margin very, very easily, and that worries me a little bit about Conley here. As for the Spurs point guards, Pat Mills, Tone Parker, look, it's not ideal. 3,800 for Millsy, 4,100 for Tone. Tone Parker's had a couple of weird stretches this year where he plays like 28 minutes a night and goes for 15 and 8, and you go, what's this? This is 4 years ago, Tone Parker. But in general, relying upon that's impossible to do. You can't do it. And we talk about the Spurs being a good defensive team. The Grizzlies are a good defensive team too. They're slowing each other down. I see no value really in Tone, and limited in Pat Mills. He's more of an upside type of GPP option, Millsy. But even so, I don't 100% love it. I do like that GPP upsideness of him, though. Of course, we're not looking at Andy Harrison in any situation. At shooting guard, Dan Green's at 3,800. Has been terrible pretty much the entire season in terms of his fantasy output. He's still an awesome defender, and he's still an awesome part of what the Spurs do, but his production has been putrid, really, for the majority of this season from our fantasy point of view. As for him here at 3,800, I'm pretty sure you can do better than Dan Green. At 33 on DraftKings, though, you might not be able to do better than 3,300. That's a really, really cheap price for a starter who's probably going to play 30 minutes and has got that ability to put up a Richie Beno on any night.
2 for 2.
And if you don't know what that means, it's 2 threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Like, he can do that. And at 3,300, if you do that, you're almost at value right there. He pulls down 6 boards, he gets 12 points, and it's a good night for Dan. But realistically, he has struggled quite a lot this season. Manu at 36, I don't really see much upside in Ginobili there. And Troy Daniels is the other guy who could come into play with Allen missing. I don't know if they give him the big minutes, but he is only... If they say Daniels is starting, or we're going to see a lot of Troy Daniels, he is only a GPP guy because his value, it is based so much on his shot. And if the shot doesn't fall, he gives nothing. But if he gets hot, it's 7 threes and 24 points. And you go, oh, okay, well, that's a nice performance from Troy Daniels. It'll probably be 24, 1 and 1, but it's still 24. So that's why he can have some value. And he, on DraftKings, is ridiculously cheap. He's one of those $2,000 guys, $2,700. And that might be one of those weird, if you want to take a punt on someone to replace Allen and you go with Daniels, that's your GPP differentiator right there, especially at that DraftKings price, which is just stupid low. But in terms of putting trust in it, not easy to do. At small forward, Kawhi, love Kawhi. 8,300 for Kawhi. It feels like almost a guarantee that he's going for 40. And he's probably pushing 45, 46. So at 8,300, if you're not going LeBron, you don't want to spend that extra $3,000 that it costs to get LeBron, then Kawhi, he's a really good option. On DraftKings, he's not quite there because he's at 85, so it is a higher price. But he's still going to be pushing 50 probably over with DraftKings scoring, and that's really valuable there too. So I do like Kawhi quite a bit. Vincy Carter's a minimum salary guy. He's going to start, and I think he's going to play 30 minutes, probably more than that. In terms of him having usage or touching the ball a lot, well, it won't happen all that much, but he can go off. We've seen a couple of times from Vince, he's just a GPP guy, but minimum salary guy who starts and plays 30 plus minutes and can have those scoring bursts, you have to consider them. And that's just one of the rules of DFS, even though there aren't rules as such. As for Jim Ennis, he's a minimum salary guy as well. And on DraftKings, he's at 2,800. So talk about Troy Daniels at 27, Ennis at 28. If he gets 30 minutes, that is stupid value. because Ennis has struggled at times this year. He's had some big games, but at 2,800, if he gets 15 points, 15 points, that's all he needs. It's not hard. In the last 5 games, he had a 34-pointer. He's not going to be able to just easily do that against the Spurs, but at 2,800, it is very, very hard to go past, assuming he plays. We don't know if he plays. We don't know if he starts. We don't know his minutes. So there's a lot of risk there, but he has got massive, massive upside, especially at that low price. At power forward, I like LaMarcus Aldridge at 6,300. He's at 62 on DraftKings. And the immediate thought comes to you and you go, oh yeah, I don't like the matchup against the Grizzlies, against Gasol and their front court, but Aldridge has done really well against them. His last 3 games, according to DraftKings scoring, he's averaged 37 points. He's going to see increased minutes in the playoffs, and I think that you're going to see, you've got real 40-point upside here with LaMarcus Aldridge, so I really like him here. JaMychal Green's a minimum salary guy on FanDuel. I'm not sure how much he's going to play, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Grizzlies go with a 3-man front court of Green, Randolph, and Gasol, and you might get 27 out of JaMychal in that sense. You give you 30 to Zach and your 40 to Mark to sort of boost those numbers up, and maybe Brandon Wright is eliminated from the rotation there. So at 3,500 for a guy that starts that could push 30 minutes, then JaMychal has a bit of value. At 4,000 on DraftKings, I don't really like that. He hasn't really shown too much aptitude for scoring in big bunches. In 4,000, if he was 3,000 on DraftKings, I'd say go for it. But at 4,000, I'm just not quite there on JaMychal. As for Zebo, he's at 5,500. I actually like that at 5,500 for him. AD does well against the Spurs. Big front court. He can play some extra minutes. I think that's going to be in play here. We're going to see a lot of Zebo, Gasol. Even if Randolph doesn't start, I think you're going to see pretty much 30 a night from Randolph, especially with the rests that get built into the playoffs. I think you're going to see 30 points from Randolph here. He's at 52 on DraftKings. I think that's a really, really good price tag for him. Dave Lee, not so much there for him. At center, Pau Gasol against his brother, 5,200 for Pau. I'm not really feeling that for Gasol, to be honest. I think that it's okay. I don't think there's massive upside, and I think there's also a bit of a risk in cash. So I'm not totally onto Pau at that sort of a salary. As for Mark, $7,000 for Gasol. The matchup is not ideal. He has struggled against the Spurs in the past, averaging just 28 points in his last 3 outings against this team. But if they push him to 40 minutes or so, he's a real chance. But to me, he is just a GPP guy. I'm not feeling strongly about him for cash. And The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedmon at 3,500. No, I just don't think that they're going to play. I wish they would. I just don't think that they're going to play him enough for it to be altogether purposeful. Let's move on to the last game of the night. That is the Utah Jazz and the Los Angeles Clippers, the most intriguing series of the entire playoffs in my mind. The Clippers are favored by 5.5, and the total is 200.5. It's really weird to see a Jazz game be the second highest total of the night, but that is when you see Memphis, San Antonio playing each other, and Milwaukee, Toronto. Let's talk injuries. There's none. Apart from Austin Rivers, who is out, probably return game 3, game 4. Everyone for the Jazz is ready to go, which is apart from Raul Neto, but that's not impacting much. But everyone else is ready to go. So there's some excitement here to see what the Jazz can do. Derek Favors reckons he's at 100%. He reckons he's ready to go. Let's hope so, because we want to see a healthy Derek Favors. That would be really good. That's bad use of words, but we haven't seen it for majority of this season, and I'm really pumped to see that if it actually happens that way. Chris Paul on DraftKings is at 8,100. That is ridiculously low. Now, I know the Jazz have been good against point guards, but Chris Paul is a very, very amazing point guard. Again, bad use of words, but 8,100 for him is a super, super play, I reckon, in my mind. 87 for him on FanDuel. I'm not quite as interested in Chrissy Paul at that price, but it's still okay. But I would rather Kyle Lowry on FanDuel at the $100 less, but you flip over to DraftKings and Chris Paul's way cheaper. So I would take Chris Paul in that sort of an instance. And that's a big, big price difference, and it does make a difference. Paul's lowest score in his last 5 games has been 42 points. It's fantastic. He's been putting up some really, really good numbers. Now, as for George Hill, I assume that he is ready to go full steam ahead. But if everyone else is ready to go, we've seen Hill take a semi-back seat. If Gordon Hayward's out and Hill's ready to go, then he's smashing 40 points. I don't have any doubt about that. But with Gordo, with Derek, with Rudy, with Rocket, with all these guys around, I don't see George having as big a usage as what we would like at 5,800. If he was at 5,000, he'd be tremendous. But at 58, I'm not really into George Hill, especially with the Chris Paul defense. I don't think we need to get too interested in Ray Felton or Dante Exum either. At shooting guard, JJ Redick, 4,400. I like Redick at that price. Yes, it is not a good defensive matchup, but we're going to see quite a few minutes out of JJ here. And at 4,400, I do really like him at that price. At 46 on DraftKings, I'm not quite there, but it's still decent. While Rocket is at 4,000, Rocket Rodney Hood, that is, 4,000 for him. He has struggled, but we've seen flashes. And if he is fit and firing and ready to go, he will beat that. He will smash that. But I don't have the full confidence in him at this point. So he is more just a tournament-y type of guy at this stage. Jamal Crawford at 36 has done very well against the Jazz in his past. At 3,600, you would hope if he gets 27 minutes, he should beat that. Now, I don't know if he'll get to that, but if he gets 27, I like him. He becomes a GPP option to me. That's Jamal Crawford. At small forward, Luke Marmute at 3,700 is not going to produce much offensively. At 2,600 on DraftKings, that's one of the lowest prices that's out there. There's a level of intrigue there. He gets 18 points, right? And that's over 6x value. 18 points. He's averaging 21 in his last 3 games. And I do think that we are going to see a lot of Marmute minutes because he is amazing on Gordon Hayward. He shuts Gordon Hayward down. The last 3 times that Hayward has played against the Clippers, he has averaged under 25 DraftKings points. For reference, his last 5 actual games, he's averaged 36. So I think you're going to see when Hayward's out there, you're going to see Marmute out there. And at 2,600, shit, if he gets 16 points, it's over 6x value. And that, if you're fitting in LeBron, George, Lowry, Paul, DeRozan, all these other guys, putting a guy in there who can get you 6x, and if he has a big game, like if he has a game that gives him 25 points, you're talking 10x value. It's massive, and it's not crazy. Like in the last 5 games, he had a 27-pointer. It sounds crazy to think about Marmute doing anything offensively, but it occasionally does. He's hit his threes at a much better rate this year. He has seemed more confident. I remember one play against the Cavs that he was ISO against LeBron, took him off the dribble, spun past him for a dunk, and you go, who the hell is this guy? So it can happen, and that price is super appealing because he is going to be on the court a lot, especially with no Austin Rivers there. You're going to get a lot of Marmute as he works to just shut the shit out of Gordon Hayward. As for Hayward, the Marmute situation bothers me. He's at 7,500, but Luke gets in his head, and it does affect what Gordo can do. 7,300 for Hayward, I'm not feeling it. The Marmute situation just, especially with so many other good small forward options out there, I just don't feel that for Gordo at all here. Jingle and Joe with everyone healthy at 4,100, I just don't see it for Ingles, unfortunately. Same with Joe Johnson with Favors back at 4,300. There's nothing really to see there. At power forward, Blake Griffin's at 8,200. I don't like it for cash. The Favors-Gobert matchup could be an issue for Blake. But for upside, there aren't really any high-priced power forwards that are great unless you're on DraftKings and you're counting Paul George there. So if you've got that cash left over, you might want to take Blake, but he's one of the worst high-priced guys, I think, that's on the slate at that sort of a price tag. He's at 77 on DraftKings, so it's a little bit better, but it's still definitely not filling me with much glee. 48 for Derek Favors. I'm not ready to buy in yet until I actually see him play at his full strength. At center, DeAndre Jordan's at 7,700. He's got the Gobert matchup, and that's tough. He's coming off some crushing performances. They're going to play him a lot. At 7,700, he is okay. At 68 on DraftKings, I can't go past that. Now, look at his past games against Utah. They're terrible. And that is the risk. But at that $6,800 price tag, I do really have to like that. There aren't many great centers on this board. You've got the risk of Miles Turner in Indiana. Tristan Thompson, he's nothing. Greg Monroe, what are they going to do? Valanciunas, are the minutes going to be limited? Marc Gasol, he's all right, but he is obviously a little bit more expensive and has struggled against the Spurs. Pau Gasol struggled as well. Yeah, Jordan's one of these guys that I know exactly what's going to happen. I know how many minutes he's going to get, and it's going to be a lot. The Gobert factor is just a problem. Now, as for Rudy, he is a very high-priced player. 8,900 for Gobert on FanDuel, 8,300 for Gobert on DraftKings. Now, I like it a lot more on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel, but to me, at that sort of a price tag, I'm not convinced that that's cash usable. I would rather go cheaper at center and spend up on the wings Or at point guard, Chrissy Paul LeBron, Chrissy Paul Kawhi, Kyle Lowry, Paul George, that sort of combination. Then spending up for, say, Rudy Gobert at center and taking someone a little bit cheaper. Maybe it is a Tristan Thompson that you take. Maybe you take a punt on Greggy Munro. Maybe you do take Marcus Gasol there. But I don't think that spending up the $9,000 on Gobert is probably the best way to go. Let's now look at the picks of the day. On FanDuel, Tone Parker at 38. There's not many cheap point guards out there who you think could approach 30 minutes, so Parker does become that option, but it's only a tournament play. Jeffy Teague at 7,000 and Lowry at 86. JJ Redick at 44, DeRozan at 83. At small forward, PJ Tucker 38, Chrissy Middleton 59, and Kawhi at 83. At power forward, JaMychal Green 35, LaMarcus Aldridge at 63, and Blakey Griffin at 8,200. And at center, Tristan Thompson 47, DeAndre Jordan 77, and Rudy Gobert at 89 as a tournament type option. DraftKings, Brogo 5,000, Irving 78, and Chris Paul 81. Shooting guard, Tone Snell 3,000, DeRozan 8,000. And that's with the shooting guards on both sites. It's either dirt cheap or DeRozan. Everyone else is like under $5,000. There's like no in-between price at shooting guard. Small forward, Jim Ennis 2,800, Chrissy Middleton 61, and Kawhi at 85. PJ Tucker 34, Zebo 52, and Paul George 98. And at center, Greg Munro 4,800, DeAndre Jordan 68, and Rudy Gobert 8,300. Enjoy the playoffs. It's fun, it's super, it's exciting. Some of our favorite players aren't in the playoffs, like Nikola Jokic, like Gaz Harris. There's plenty of our favorite, Karl Anthony Towns. Plenty of our favorite guys aren't in the playoffs. But there's still going to be heaps of stuff that's happening. And just a quick thing, the New York Knicks. What is going on with this team? We talked yesterday, and I hadn't heard that Phil Jackson had been extended, or they picked up his option. I think Greg was the one that mentioned. I hadn't seen that. I cannot believe they picked up his extension. And then Phil Jackson comes out today and says that we're going to trade Carmelo Anthony. Melo is done. He is not playing for that team anymore. I can't see any way that happens. Phil's going for the betterment of this team. He's not going to be here. And then Porzingis skips out in his exit interview. Says, screw this team. I'm sick of the drama. I can't deal with this shit. Basically, fuck off and I'm out of here. What is this organization doing? Has Phil Jackson made one right decision apart from drafting Porzingis? The international scouting on this team is great. Porzingis, Hernan Gomez. Yeah, that's really good. But triangle, bad. Derek Fisher, bad. Handling of Derek Fisher, bad. Hornacek, seemed good at the time. Hornacek's been bad, but I think he's been puppeteered a little bit with some of his coaching moves and his coaching style. That's not what he wants to do, is the crap that he's running. Yeah, signing Noah, bad. Derrick Rose, bad. Not building around Porzingis, bad. Yeah, I honestly think that Melo, if you had approached it correctly, Melo gets a really bad rap at times. I honestly think that if you had approached it correctly, Melo would have been happy being the guy to work with Porzingis. To say, look, Melo, you've been great for us, but this guy's going to be our future. I want you to transition into a secondary role, and let's build around Kristaps. And you're the guy, you're the number 2, you're the number 3, but let's build around him. And I honestly think that Melo and Porzingis have got a good relationship. I think that Melo would have been fine with that. But the decision-making of this, and now Porzingis is pissed off. Look, how do you go about alienating your biggest name for the last 5 years and at the same time alienating your future star? How do you do both of those things? The logic would say, all right, you're pushing out your old star to build around your new star in Porzingis, but no, you've managed to push both of them away. How is that even possible? It is ineptitude, and the fact that Dolan doesn't recognize it and says, and he's got a way out, and he says, no, you know what, Phil, keep going, mate, you're doing a good job, is just indicative of how shithouse this franchise is run. Phil Jackson doesn't know what he's doing as an executive, has made horrendous decision after horrendous decision. He's a PR nightmare. He's trading barbs with his players in public, and imagine what he's doing in private to players, coaches, executives. What's he saying to those guys? He is married to an antiquity, that's the word I'm trying to find, an old system that has no flexibility for current NBA play. And now you've pissed off your best player. Both of them. You can't You can't even imagine this shit is possible. Okay, Phil did all the stuff. Cool, we know that. Dolan, get rid of him. No, stay for 2 more years. Sorry, Knicks fans. I feel sorry for you. Nothing against Knicks fans. I've never had a bad interaction with any Knicks fans apart from one who shall remain nameless because he is a massive, massive bellend. Never had any problem with Knicks fans. I feel sorry for him. This is ineptitude at the highest order. Dolan, get rid of him. It is clear as day, but you're as big a knob as everyone. Fix this shit up, or you're going to be mired in ineptitude for the next 10 years, 15 years. Because if you screw up Porzingis, forget it. Forget anything happening in the next 10 years. After he stormed out today, things are looking rosy. All right, we are done. Good luck in your DFS for the playoffs. Good luck in watching the playoffs. I hope your team wins that is in the playoffs. If not, I hope your team gets good lottery luck. We're done. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.